We survived Raze. And the war. We also survived a weak launch.
We sort of survived a weak launch.
Sort of.
We survived all the intervening years of... What have we been doing?
Just waiting. Biding our time.
Heh, right. What for?
Waiting until the time is right.
Oh, right. So what are we doing now?
Listening to some sort of review.
Review?
The game was developed by Artec Studios, known for indie titles and projects of smaller development cycles, like game show and board game adaptations, among other arcade-type games. Raze's Hell is precisely the opposite, being a long-in-development project experiencing a little hell of its own. This is in fact an Xbox exclusive, and never made its way to other platforms. The only way that Raze's Hell could have gotten some exposure was from the publisher they picked up, Majesco, which was already extremely focused on their intended blockbuster success, Advent Rising, premiering just a month later to extremely poor sales and average reception. The game was intended to boost Majesco's dream idea of being a AAA company, but as you can surely tell, the dream was short-lived. Raze's Hell, however, had a reception that was for the most part higher than Advent Rising. With Advent Rising's massive marketing still not being enough to save the game, its sequel as well as multiple other adaptations like comic book series were completely canned, and Majesco as a result nearly went bankrupt. Only recently has Majesco more or less been wiped from the scene, as it was purchased by Polarity TE in late of 2016, seizing all their video game endeavors and flipping the establishment into a biomedical research team. Talk about a career change. Jesse Sutton, Majesco's chief executive officer, managed to repurchase the company in mid-2017 to continue their operations in video gaming. Nevertheless, the future of this company seems at most questionable, as their development pretty much has been since the Advent Rising flop in 2005. On the surface, Raze's Hell seems to be the kind of game that you'd think to have a large fan base behind it, what with its unique personality and grotesque approach to cute and innocent creatures. I've helped to gather a small community for the game with the contributions I've made over the years, and perhaps today I can inspire you to be a part of this niche community, lost in gaming history due to improper timing and insufficient marketing efforts. Of course, we're just beginning. Without further ado, let me introduce to you the Villagers, an ugly race of creatures from an equally ugly village, or so the princess wants you to believe. On that note, far away on the other side of the world exists a powerful democracy ruled by the princess, a deviant soul with ulterior motives. In this land known as Cutopia, there exists a race of adorable creatures known as Kewletts. The Kewletts are a privileged race with bounties of riches and overwhelming numbers. All was peaceful until the princess of the land revealed her plans to the people of Cutopia. The idea was to bring their infinite bounties to the less fortunate, to save them from their crippling flaws, to rid of poverty, to cure their ugliness, and to expand their populace into the hinterland. While the princess's intentions sound noble on first impression, the execution brought about misery and violence as the Cutopians moved forth with slaving and killing the ugly villagers from the other side. One may assume misinterpretation, but it was in fact ordered by the princess as part of her devious Operation Fresh Hope. The race of Kewletts are not of the utmost intelligence and follow through with it, no questions asked, though this wasn't without some getting used to. Nevertheless, if the princess orders, the Kewletts follow due to her sheer beauty, and as far as they're concerned, her attractive personality. With no chance of negotiation, the Kewletts follow suit and enslave the populace, oblivious to the truth at hand.
Local residents seem overjoyed by our boy's arrival. Everything is as right as rain.
After all, like Sam once told us,
it's always the cute and cuddly ones that go fascist the fastest.
The villagers are severely misfortuned, as well as outnumbered, so the chance of fighting back to the Kewlett infantry is slim to none. But there exists one soul among the villagers who is about to wreak havoc on the plans of the princess. This creature was Raze. By some quirk of fate, Raze stumbled into a cave that held an ancient artifact with very special powers. Powers that had no effect on most, but on Raze, it manages to turn him into a freak show of muscle, armor, and abilities. The power of the artifacts was not unknown to the princess. She had planned for their extraction to be used for yet another one of her secretive plans. That's more of a spoiler, though we'll address it later after a spoiler warning. After Raze reaps the reward of the mystical artifact, he is greeted by an unknown flying creature, introducing himself as the artifact's keeper. The keeper spends some time with Raze, educating him on the new powers he developed from the artifact. Raze sports a massive blade on one arm, capable of tearing through flesh and bone, easily becoming a useful weapon against the Kewletts. The keeper then reintroduces Raze to Squibs. Squibs are tiny creatures packaged in jellyfish-esque bushes which the villagers have consumed for years, alongside many other woodland-type creatures, some of which not making much anatomical sense.
Well, that's disillusioning.
The squibs no longer provide only a nutritional value. Raze had unknowingly developed another power during his transition. He now has the ability to spit squibs he consumes out at the Kewletts at a very fast rate, so much so that they can rip straight through wood, and in most cases, even metal. Raze eats the squibs by clicking and holding the L3 button. Most of the 10 available weapons mirror real military weapons, so you should have no difficulty getting used to them. Making the process even easier is the squib selection, which is handled with the D-pad. As you can tell, there are only 4 slots, but you're able to quickly customize these slots in-game by pressing the A button and highlighting a squib with the left analog stick. Upon highlighting one, you can just tap the D-pad in the direction you want to assign to the slot, and there you go. Simple as that. The first squib you encounter, called the Ripper, works like a machine gun. As per its real-world equivalent, its accuracy is not very reliable, but in short bursts it is easy enough to hit a target from a distance. It's pretty much the only reliable weapon against a Kewlett helicopter patrol, since it's the only true rapid-fire weapon, and the helicopters move so fast that using a more noticeable projectile-based weapon probably won't help take it down. Shooting too quickly in a short time will put Raze out of breath, kinda like a machine gun would do as it overheats. Raze cannot use any of his weapons during this window of time, though it is entirely preventable with proper attention and planning. The second squib, called the Spiker, doesn't have an exact counterpart in real life, though it can be compared to the likes of many other fictional video game weapons like Doom's UAC pistol and Unreal 2's LEPEW13 dispersion pistol. The weapon carries a charge upon holding the right trigger, then unleashes a combination shot all contained within one entity, seizing it from spreading. The Spiker shot allows Raze to see further like a sniper rifle scope, and also makes for enhanced hearing upon zooming, allowing Raze to listen in on surrounding Kewlett conversations. The third squib, called the Blaster, parallels to a rocket launcher. It has a big arc, dropping quickly to the surface upon firing. It also gives Raze the same zoom and hearing abilities from the Spiker. The fourth squib, the Driller, is essentially a sniper rifle. It can zoom in twice as far as the Spiker and Blaster, with 2 alternate distance options. Raze can shoot weaker Kewletts in the head for an instant and brutal kill, removing the head from the host. Little known fact for a little known game, the headshots are actually fake, as the model simply shrinks the head partition to a minuscule size, which can actually still be seen by zooming in close to the corpse. The fifth squib, the Smasher, is the game's equivalent of a shotgun. Any range beyond 5 meters will require a multitude of shots to take down an enemy. At a range beyond 5 meters, you'll find that the spread is not reliable enough to hit a target, more significantly over other video game shotguns. However, up close the weapon boasts devastating power, able to take down some of the biggest threats in just a few hits. The sixth squib is the Igniter. This creates a puddle of oil which, upon being fired at by any weapon, burns a large circle, lighting anything within its range of flame. If caught with Igniter ammo without anything else to defend with from a distance, the Igniter proves virtually useless to Raze. However, where an enemy exists, gunfire does too. If an enemy shoots within the puddle of oil, they will ignite it, causing their own foolish demise. Once an oil puddle ignites, Raze can inhale the flames, which gives him access to the one non-projectile related weapon, fire. Fire works as a flamethrower, essentially turning Raze into a flightless dragon. The range is very limited, and only 5 exhalations can be stored. But if fire can be located, Raze can infinitely inhale it. Oil puddles last for a predetermined amount of time, but ammunition sheds will burn infinitely. Upon finding one, Raze can blow it up and inhale the flames as he would from a resulting oil puddle. It must be understood that fire has no effect against heavily armored enemies, as going up to one with only thus in stock will most likely result in Raze's death. The biggest drawback to fire is that it's never introduced at all in-game, and first-time players likely won't know of its existence, despite being a very, often one-hit kill weapon. The seventh squib, the Lurker, is used as a remote mine. It's the strongest weapon in Raze's arsenal, with no immunities besides the at times difficult navigation. The eighth squib, the Bloater, inflates your enemies like a balloon. It, like fire, is worthless against armored enemies as it cannot penetrate through metal. Luckily, the majority of enemies you'll come across in Raze's Hell have no armor, thus it can be used against them without any issue. The Bloater is a one-hit kill for those which can be affected by it. After inflating the enemy, they will continue to float through the air until they hit an obstacle, or are directly fired at, where like a balloon they'll flail across the sky. The enemies never seem to entirely deflate, and instead continue to flail around until they've hit an obstacle where they'll explode into a pile of guts. The flailing process itself can really be a lengthy one. Luckily, you need pay no attention to them at that point. The ninth and final squib is the Seeker, which similarly to the Lurker, is controlled by Raze. This squib is unique in how you'll navigate it through the air using traditional, non-inverted controls. Upon getting close to a target, it'll home in, making it easier to use behind obstacles. However, it will often home in on targets you hadn't anticipated, making its usefulness negotiable. With the large range of weaponry available to Raze, and a small group of resistance fighters, the war between the villagers and the Kewletts begins. The game starts off by teaching you the basics, camera controls, movement, progressively informing you of terrain-specific features, obstacles, and maneuvers to get you from point A to point B successfully. One such feature is the map, which can be accessed at any point in time. The places that you've been will open up to you on the map as you navigate around. It is selected by pressing the select button. As Raze fights towards Cutopia for his revenge against the princess, many missions will surface, such as destroying large mortar towers with nukes that you'll find by their markings on the map. Otherwise, you'll be destroying generators with your weaponry, among many other smaller goals. What comes as the most prominent obstacle in Raze's journey is the force of Kewletts themselves. Very well trained in combat, at least as far as artificial intelligence is concerned. The Kewletts are indeed stupid in nature, though their programming is actually good to the point of being able to compare them to someone in real life that you'd consider genuinely stupid at warfare. What isn't defined by artificial intelligence, however, is the placement of environmental hazards and turrets hypothetically deployed by Kewletts. The placement is usually quite good, keeping it fresh and exciting with different types of battles and terrain-specific confrontations. You may come across a tank which is difficult to take down with weaponry, but simple to detonate with a deployed nuke. Or perhaps you'll enter a new area cluttered with red crystals, just waiting to be hit by any type of gunfire to set them all off at once, which will kill virtually every living creature within range, including yourself if you're not careful. Sometimes, however, the placement is not so good. At times, turrets will be placed at unfair locations, staying undetected by the player due to mountains and rocks in the way of the player's view. It's smart on the opposing side, but for a video game where the purpose is to enjoy yourself, alterations should have been made to give the player some type of edge so they're not walking straight into their own doom via trial and error. Perhaps unrelated to placement, but various obstacles like tanks and other vehicles have the ability to run over Raze, instantly killing him and starting you back at what could be a rather distant checkpoint. Checkpoints are usually few, and aren't all too fair, especially due to the game's unforgiving nature of difficulty, which is a common topic of discussion when it comes to Raze's Hell. I would classify it as a hard game, but I don't consider it to be brutal. Why I feel that way can be linked to the brutal attribute of Raze's approach in killing Kewletts. The Keeper tells us early into the game that Raze can devour the guts of Kewletts after spreading them across the surface, acting as a meal that heals Raze in the battlefield. This essentially means that every kill you get is a percentile of health you get back, so long as you rip open the Kewlett corpse. This can easily be done after killing a Kewlett by slamming them with your blade, executed by the standard melee attack. You'll then eat the Kewlett guts by sucking them in the same way you would squibs by pressing L3. Now, I did emphasize eating Kewletts, but you're technically not put at a restraint from eating whatever you damn well want, even your own villager friends. You can even go to the length of killing them yourself for a tasty treat, and this all works the same as any Kewlett in Trails. You could even snack on some of the wildlife, sporting many more internals than you would have thought possible. Alternatively, you might gib a bomber bear and find a serious lack of guts from the giant. No matter the size of your enemy, they will always gib the equivalent amount. The game tries to hide this with friendlies of higher significance, like a spiritual being called the Zorlak, by giving it regenerating health. However, with just enough force, you can exploit this and gib it anyways. Grenades are also NPCs. Just look at them bleed. Every character in the game is basically the same in code. They just serve different functions and roles. This can be said about a lot of video games, albeit most of them tackle this obstacle correctly by differing attributes, like alternate gib colors and destruction models. System Link multiplayer shows that blue gibs do in fact exist, which could register to Raze's villager race, although for whatever reason this was overlooked for the campaign. Otherwise, Raze's Hell traditionally has just one gibbing method, which is to expel 4 or 5 giblet pieces, unless you roll into an enemy, giving you just 2 giblets. The roll is, by the way, another ability Raze has, used for faster transportation and knocking so many Kewletts into the screen, it'd make Cruise and Exotica blush. Impact, however, causes some damage to Raze, so do be careful not to overdo it. Raze's Hell has a regenerating health meter somewhat similar to the armor regeneration seen in Bungie's Halo series, but with enough differences to set it apart. In Raze's Hell, your health goes down as you're hit, but there exists a second, darker bar beneath the health bar that indicates how far your true health can regenerate after maintaining a cover position for long enough. If you continue to get hit, just like the health meter, it goes down and represents how far your regeneration will fill. Regenerating health will never get you back to full health. It's then up to you to kill more Kewletts and replenish that way, to start the system over. You'll find yourself taking a lot of damage in a firefight, so should you go out there like a reverse kamikaze, you'll have to kill and eat in rapid succession, with no mind for regeneration, since in a firefight you have virtually no chance of regen. Alternatively to guns blazing, you have the option of approaching the game stealthily, putting yourself at less of a risk. Pressing the X button will put Raze into a crouching position. This he can take advantage of to sneak around without being heard by the Kewletts who would otherwise notice your lingering footsteps. When behind an enemy while crouching, you can press the fire button to perform one of many kill moves to take down the opposing force. It was always fun to see a new animation and hear some of the humorous dialogue Kewlett spewed upon death, despite the one animation for the elite Cutinator being entirely silent. Besides that, this ties in greatly to the internalized personality the game has, full of life, and ironically, also death. We'll talk more about the game's personality though a bit later on. There's still more to talk about regarding the stealth system. It's integrated fairly well, but leaves a lot to be desired. For instance, there is no indication of whether you're close enough to a Kewlett or not. A button indicator showing the right fire trigger would have been nice, as sometimes you'll end up just hitting the enemy. Also in some scenarios, the enemies are still on high alert. You're unable to perform a kill move in these instances. As a result, you may get the attention of an enemy you instead wanted to stealthily tackle down. In addition to this, the level design itself seems to only be loosely designed with stealth in mind. The game has its moments, but truthfully, it provides very few instances where stealth makes for a worthy tactic. Most of the game has large masses of infantry surrounding the map, making areas in which you can't be seen very scarce. Most attempts to kill an enemy this way will result in a surprise failure to do so. Even if you're able to hide once again, which admittedly is easy with the Kewlett attention span of about 3 seconds, it probably won't do you any good since the enemies rarely go off guard after being alerted. Oftentimes you'll find them staring right where they last saw you, likely being around the vicinity of where you are, so the chances in a situation like this to maneuver around them and perform a finishing move, very slim. Much more idle would be enemies that glitch out of their artificial intelligence, simply presenting a standstill until you break them of their miserable comatose. It isn't a common occurrence, but I've had it happen probably around once every playthrough. This tends to happen most commonly to gunner critters, and with that I think we should move along to the characters and their roles in the game. Firstly, there are Kewlett gunners. These soldiers carry rapid-fire death-in-the-box weapons which require physical force to reload by pushing down on the doll's head that pops up once the maximum cartridge has been expelled. Some Kewlett gunners have moderate armor support, requiring a little extra punishment to take down. Regardless of their attributes, they will run around the terrain and shoot any resistance fighter in sight. They provide a moderate threat, but in numbers can be considerably lethal. Secondly, there are the Axe Guards. They carry massive lollipop axes that do a lot of damage within a short period of time. Keeping your distance is rather easy though, and a quick roll away will keep these Axe Guards at bay. Thirdly, there are the Special Ops. These characters play the same role as the Kewlett gunners, but sport camouflage print and have a larger depth of sight with their night vision capabilities. These forces are deployed via balloon parachute from a Kewlett cargo carrier. Not too long into the game, you'll come across members of the Critter Gang, who unfortunately have no sort of introduction. Not only that, but the game never explains their origin or relevance to the universe. Are they part of the Kewlett race, or are they something else entirely? A proper introduction to these characters would have been nice, kinda like the Cutinators who spawn in via rainbow teleportation, instantly ready to shoot a barrage of lasers in your direction. These heavily armored Kewletts require a lot of force to take down. They're much more agile in battle and cover every bit of terrain that they can in quick succession. They're truly not a force to be reckoned with, but more so is this relevant to elite Cutinators. These specialized Cutinators sport fluorescent rainbows around their armor, becoming easily identifiable from generic Cutinators. Their weaponry is a lot more powerful, able to take you down completely with just a few shots. Encounter one very strategically if you can, or you'll likely regret it. The Gunner Critter is the first of the critter line you'll encounter. They provide the same role as Kewlett gunners, but are added to bring some diversity to the mix. Their close relatives carry double-barreled shotguns which can take you down very quickly. If you see one in battle, make taking them down a priority. The Sniper Critters are the highest tier among critters, lurking in the shadows with camouflage provided by nature itself. They fire just one bullet before reloading, though they bear the deadliest projectiles within the game. Be sure to make note of Sniper Critters when they're spotted in the battlefield. The other two critters are Bomber Bears and Suicide Bears. Suicide Bears are essentially younger Bomber Bears, given the role of running up to you, flipping upside down, and triggering their explosive TNT plungers. Be careful of these guys because they have killer instincts. Once they've spotted you, it's impossible to lose them, literally. They yell as they run up to you, making you well aware of their presence. These are very similar in comparison to Serious Sam's Kamikaze, which is likely where the game took inspiration from. Bomber Bears are the older relatives of Suicide Bears, throwing grenades from a distance. Quite a distance, in fact, as they seem to have no restriction to the lengths of which they can throw. They're not much different from grenade critters, if not exactly the same. Grenade critters, though, are part of the Kewlett Special Forces. If you can catch the rumors from various Kewletts, these creatures were part of an experiment that holds a priority role in the game. We'll get to that part soon. Grenade critters are the same direct species of paintball and gas grenade critters, though serve different roles. The gas grenade critter shoots grenades all the same, but these grenades are filled with a gas that disorients the player, scrambling their controls and making them unable to look around properly. They can be distinguished from other critters of their sort by their green outfit compared to the generic grenade critter's yellow outfit. Paintball critters sport a wild outfit mixed with blue and purple, covering your vision with paintballs, making the player unable to properly see what's going on. They go away in a matter of seconds, but when combined with the gas grenade critter's weaponry, it takes all methods of interaction away from the player. This is something I don't have much of a fondness for, but I've come to tolerate them more as I've played the game over the years. Essentially, all you have to do is prioritize them in battle, followed by the toughest threats. Analyzing the battlefield before going in is always smart and generally quite fun to do as well. The level design is mostly well balanced in enemy placement. That I now realize makes up for their malicious nature. If you're caught by these guys, it's usually your own fault. One complaint I still would be willing to admit is that no grenades seem to look any different. Gas grenades could have benefited from being green, like the outfit of the critters that shoot them. The remaining 3 critters are all unique. There's a rocket launcher critter who shoots explosive bunnies at the player. These cause a lot of damage upon a direct hit. The tri-rocket critter shoots 3 rockets at once, which all home onto the player, swiveling directly towards you. The last critter is the homing rocket critter, whom of which is only encountered in the swamps by the Cutopian border, taking place exclusively in levels 13 and 14. The rockets home in on the player like the tri-rocket launcher critters, though only 1 rocket is present and it plays a jingle as it stalks you. It's unknown why the tri-rocket launcher critter appears before these guys, as they're much less deadly. By appearance it makes sense to restrict them to the swamps, but by attributes it's rather confusing. Second to last, there are the Kewlett residents. You'll only come across 1 or 2 of these throughout the main campaign, until you reach Cutopia, where hundreds scatter across the city streets. They have the worst artificial intelligence of the bunch. In fact, they're practically broken. It's very easy to break their animations because virtually any interaction sets it back to a default pose where they'd be holding their death-in-the-box weapons. Alas, being residents, they don't have one, so they stay stuck in this position. Not only that, but they can often get stuck on simply nothing. You can pay them no attention, which you really don't have to, albeit some of them load up in plain sight, which is a bit hard to miss. Essentially, the role of these residents is to give the player a buffet of health should they need it, in the large-scale battles ahead. They're undoubtedly the most broken entities in the game. Luckily, they don't matter too much, and their broken nature doesn't affect anything but immersion. Lastly, there's the princess herself, seemingly innocent with a very dark core. She shows no remorse in her goals, even going as far as to kill off various Kewlett assistants for being unable to serve her in the way she expects of them. The princess has made it her goal to have the Kewletts eliminate the villagers to get rid of their ugliness, though that was only her cover story. The only thing the princess was really after were the ancient artifacts, guarded by the villagers' spiritual relatives. The shaman is one of the villagers who watched over the artifacts, but is quickly captured towards the beginning of the game. The shaman is, however, just a guardian. There exists a more powerful, mystical being known as the Zorlak, who has protected the race of villagers for centuries until he required a resting period long ago. The Zorlak can only be awakened by placing the 3 ancient artifacts on individual pillars that will reflect them towards the Zorlak's resting place. Hold on, but what about the Keeper? Wasn't he the guardian of the artifacts? If not, then who is he? This is where the spoilers begin. Sliv is a Hugly. What is a Hugly, you're probably wondering? Well, a Hugly is a Kewlett who is born with a horrific, rare disease which turns a typical Kewlett into an ugly, repulsive beast over a period of time. Sliv has already experienced the transformation, as you can tell. There exists a solution, but it hasn't proven very successful. This is the operation known as Cuteification. The critters are a result of this experimental procedure. I believe this only applies to the grenade critters, gas grenade critters, and paintball critters. Reason being, the rest of the critters really aren't ugly, and they're even characterized as cute in their official documentations. These 3, however, not so much. In fact, throughout the game you can hear mumbles from various Kewletts speaking of how they don't so much like these creatures. Why is this important to the player? Well, that's because the princess herself is a Hugly. Her only goal as far as the game portrays is to experience a truly successful Hugly reversal operation. With the reputation of Cuteifications, the princess knows she can't hold herself at such a risk. Instead, she hopes to use the artifacts which, upon being triggered by a person of noble birth, will grant them of the strongest desire to their heart. Raze, who stumbled upon one of the artifacts at the beginning of the game, was turned into the killing machine he wanted to be, to execute the revenge he longed for against the Kewletts who ruined his home, his family, and intentionally his race altogether with Operation Fresh Hope. The reason the war exists in the first place is so that the Kewletts can steal the artifacts from the villagers who protect it, a secret well kept from the populace of Cutopia. Essentially, it boils down to the princess's looks. That's right, the princess was mortified by her appearance, being the reason why this whole large-scale battle began. I personally think the hidden motive is so that the populace doesn't evict the princess of her role, as the Kewletts have demonstrated their distaste for both the cutified and Hugly Kewletts. Had she been discovered by the city folk, she might not be so well accepted. After all, the only remarks of the princess throughout the game are of how beautiful and smart she is. You probably have another question though. How is the princess a Hugly? She just looks like a typical humanoid princess. Well, the secret is truly contained within.
It hasn't been very easy keeping up appearances, let me tell you.
The expansion into the provinces was at first an easy mission. Operation Fresh Hope dealt with mostly defenseless villagers, an easy target for the Cutopian military. If it weren't for the ambush, sending Raze to hide but then miraculously stumble upon the first ancient artifact, the operation would have been as simple as planned. That was a tangent from the question, who is Sliv? Alas, I believe it to be a worthy narrative to further explain the story elements, which gets us closer to the core of who Sliv actually is and what his intentions are throughout the game. Sliv assists Raze in the game, giving him waypoints and goals that bring him further towards Cutopia and closer to his goal. So what is Sliv's motive? Well, Sliv is actually one of the princess's ugly sons. Yes, in fact, there are not just one, but two known relatives to the princess. Before you ask, the father figure is never established. Introducing Nihilus, the polar opposite of Sliv. Like their distinctive similarities, they both have the goal of quote-unquote helping the villagers. Nihilus, however, wants the love and appreciation of the princess. Throughout the game, we're told of this spy among the ranks who is giving her insider information, getting the locations of the remaining artifacts to eventually bring back to her. Nihilus is responsible for many of the traps which Raze finds himself within throughout the game. But not only Raze, as Nihilus initially teamed up with the other most powerful member amongst the villagers, Craig. Later into the game, Craig is locked up by the Kewletts with the help of Nihilus. Raze manages to free him with some nearby nukes, where Craig tells Raze and Sliv about his experience with Nihilus. This makes Raze a little bit skeptical of Sliv himself. Alas, Sliv tries to divert his mind from it. Nihilus later returns to Cutopia, sneaking his way into the castle to reveal himself as the spy. The princess doesn't recognize him at first, but realizes after an explanation of who he is in relation to herself. The princess here tells Nihilus that their separation wasn't a twist of fate, but a plan of her own to rid of the evidence surrounding her secret.
This time I'll make sure I get the job done right.
Before the princess manages to kill Nihilus, her scientist assistant Dr. Mingale has an idea, to perform a Hugly reversal operation on Nihilus to see if it is yet possible with their technological developments. Needless to say, it doesn't go too smoothly.
Is that...
It was.
The princess then turns to her final alternative, as one of the artifacts have been stolen thanks to Nihilus's previous endeavors. She places the item before her, attempting to make her heart's biggest desire come true. However, the princess didn't anticipate the possibility that she just might not be as noble at heart as Raze was, being the primary requirement for the artifact to work. This is about where the story ties itself up. The princess, fed up with Dr. Mingale's less than successful operations, kills him to prove her point. She then finds herself in a turmoil with no viable right-hand man to assist her lackluster judgment.
Doctor? Where's the doctor? You know...
Essentially defenseless, Raze finally arrives and confronts the princess, shortly thereafter ripping her limb from limb. Sliv comes in with the remaining Kewlett army and tries to convince Raze that unlike Nihilus or the princess, this Hugly wasn't out to get him. Sliv here will finally get what he wanted all along.
I'm gonna be king. There's been enough bloodshed. That went better than I thought.
Despite Raze's distaste for the closure, he accepts Sliv's desire and walks off back to his village. Home sweet home. For a while, there's a state of relative peace between Kewletts and the villagers.
But with Sliv in charge, that was bound to be short-lived.
And that's where Raze's Hell 2 starts off. Or, well, it could have been. To conclude the story, it's good. But there's one major issue. There is a lot of foreshadowing. In fact, the game practically relies on it, which made it very fun to revisit, but of course very confusing for first-time investors. By the time the foreshadowed events occur, the instances notifying the player initially were far too long forgotten. Many times the story will bring up previous events, which helps the engagement and understanding, but these moments often bring up more foreshadowing that might solve one inconsistency, but highlight another. Yes, the story does all connect together, and on paper it makes sense, but the presentation was frankly all over the place. Introductions rarely exist, plot devices are very poorly executed, and perhaps most of all, Raze's side of the storyline has barely any distinguishable story backing. Notice how I talked a lot more about the Cutopian side of the story, but only briefly mentioned the characters from Raze's world and their impact on the events throughout the game. Well, as ironic as it is, most of the game takes place in Raze's home territories, but so little is ever explained about them. A lot of the storytelling from their side is based on guesswork using hints the game points towards, instead just shoving new characters in your face, telling you to deal with it before you can grasp the 4 W's. I might sound aggravated by this, and at times I've found that to be true. I do get aggravated by this, because Raze's race of villagers, which if you hadn't noticed yet has no actual name, are a very interesting part of the game given so little showtime. Again, I really enjoyed the Cutopian side of the story, but it would have all connected a lot better had both sides gotten equivalent priority. Raze's Hell is underappreciated, no doubt, but it has a lot of flaws. Not a single villager is able to move their mouths in the game, meaning when they talk you'll only be looking at their stationary facial animation. As a side note, the official subtitles aren't programmed so well either, often heading to the next set of lines before the current one finishes. Even Raze doesn't move his mouth, or even his eyelids, that he clearly once did as seen in these earlier demonstrational videos of animating the characters. Raze in particular looks very menacing with these animations. Otherwise in the storytelling, there is one other major plot device in the game, which is the player notification through the QTV network. No, this isn't anything within the game, but throughout the game you'll come across Max Maxwell and his various co-anchors telling you the going-ons in and outside the kingdom. These are often hilarious, especially once the scene goes offline and the two banter off at each other. It's another reminder of the great personality the game has and how it uses both creativity and imagination to engage the viewer. A player with a keen eye might even spot little details referencing them throughout the game, like with the multiple hilarious propaganda posters and even several instances where you'll find Playboy-esque magazines with a scantily clad Maya Morningstar. Kewlett will also refer to the newscaster Max on occasion in-game, as well as many other surrounding events that give the game much more personality. Another key point in the personality is the near 7 hours of sound effects, most of which are quotes from the cast of Kewlett. The game is absolutely flooded with quotable one-liners that never get old.
If the monster eats me, and you kill that monster, bury the monster under a stone, with both our names on it.
The game unfortunately has many other negotiable bad qualities, though more so oversights and general mistakes. On the 10th level there exists a squib pack below the surface which is impossible to reach. Now's a good time to mention that you can hear squib packs when you're close to them, making a high-pitched squealing sound which is easy to cue in on. This is extremely useful when you found yourself at a lack for ammunition. In hard mode there are also more placements. Enemies are placed more frequently, among turrets and traps, so with that there's a lot to key into for a second playthrough. Admittedly, it actually made the experience a lot more engaging for me, but I never wish anyone to start there because ridding of foes is sometimes quite difficult, and often takes a lot longer. The issue with that is that after you've killed them all off, who is to say that you'll survive until the next checkpoint, where you might have to do it all over again? Admittedly, I'm not sure what could have been changed in that aspect, as checkpoints aren't that uncommon, just not too common either. I'd say, just choose the difficulty at your own discretion. We've been here a while though, we're still yet to discuss one of the game's most enchanting properties, being the soundtrack. Designed by Mike Keogh, the same guy responsible for the Star Wall soundtrack, among many other budget titles. From quiet drums to sick guitar riffs, it showed no lack of ingenuity. I'm particularly fond of the ambient tunes that perfectly reflected their situations at hand. Raze may encounter a shocking sight like a slave compound filled with dead villagers, worked and starved to death by Kewlett, unless otherwise directly killed by them. Once you reach Cutopia, the soundtrack becomes way more cheery and preppy, certainly the same sort of tone you'd expect from the Kewletts. It has a bit of a sarcastic nature to it, almost feeling like an upbeat parody of what you'd hear on shows like the Teletubbies. I'm by no means a soundtrack critic, so I can only comment on what comes naturally to me. The Cutopia portions of the soundtrack aren't bad, they're fitting, but there's some sort of lack in the soul department. Something feels missing. But perhaps it's due to the major tonal shift, which would inevitably be the case from a miserable wasteland to wealthy city streets. While I'd love to go on and on about the soundtrack, I don't have much left of importance to say about it. I'd recommend you check out a number of the tracks from Mike Keogh's SoundCloud, where he posted a large percentage of them. Otherwise, it's time to carry on. There are some potential exploits in the game, such as cheaping out distant objectives. Like in this level, just before entering Cutopia, you're to destroy 2 massive, powerful turrets. You're intended to shoot them up from the bridge, but you can actually use a ranged weapon to pick them off from a distance before they can get a sight on you. I assume jumping would also exploit the game quite a bit, which is likely why jumping doesn't exist altogether. It did at one point, as you can see in this very early concept for the game, but as they say in that video,
It's like they made 2 entirely different games before this one.
something I wish I could exploit would be the mine indicators. At some points there exist minefields that Sliv informs you of, telling Raze to use them to see the mines and avoid them. This isn't explained at all, and a typical player will just run right forward into the mines and get themselves killed. What you're supposed to do is to crouch and spot the yellow flashing indicators as mines, then avoid them. How a casual observer was intended to figure that out, I'm just not sure. It would have been pretty cool to exploit the overheating process of Ripper Squibs without abusing it too much, of course, since it ties into the game's balance, but you could temporarily disable it should you locate the Zorlak and use the potential of the Ripper power-up. That removes the overheating temporarily and increases its damage. Might as well take this opportunity to talk about the power-ups. After you awaken the Zorlak, he'll pop up a number of times in predetermined locations. He usually has some dialogue, but primarily exists furthermore to transfer some of his energy to Raze for a short time. This gives Raze the option of 3 selectable powers. There are a number of power-ups in the game, but the Zorlak will only present you with 3 of the various possibilities at once. You'll activate these power-ups by pressing the white button at any time. You can also carry multiple at once, though only the first one you chose will highlight on the screen until it's used, where afterwards the next will show up. There are weapon power-ups, instantly regenerating health, a shield, among others. My main concern is that the game doesn't tell you what these power-ups do, and it's more or less left to trial and error, unless the title directly implies what it does. Most of the power-ups are temporary, but a few of them impact you for the rest of the level. An example would be infinite power-ups, like for example the infinite spiker, which gives you infinite ammunition for it until the level completes. The only real caveat in these is once you've selected thus, should the Zorlak appear again later into the level, you won't be able to activate the power-up since you cannot have 2 power-ups activated at once. Since the infinite power-up is, well, infinite, the second appearance turns pointless. What might also feel pointless to some is the ability to drop squibs. However, it is quite useful where it's intended to be used. This is a feature you can take advantage of in multiplayer by pressing the black button after selecting a squib type. This drops the squib ammunition, whereas another player can suck it in, had they required some of that ammunition type. The same can be done for all types of squib-related weapons. In single player, this still serves a moderate role, however, as explosive squibs can be shot at from a distance and will blow up. This can be useful for setting traps for those creative players. Try not to make too big an explosion though, as the game tends to glitch if you amplify it further than intended. Not only that, but it really brings down the performance, even at times displaying graphical glitches upon doing so. This was played on the Xbox 360, and I don't recall ever seeing this graphic on the original Xbox, though I imagine that's how most people would end up playing this game regardless. To just take a moment to talk about the Xbox 360 version, it plays just well, though it is an Xbox original and isn't listed as otherwise. I believe the downloadable Marketplace version is just a direct upload of the disc. Overall, it must be said that Raze's Hell's frame rate is a bit wonky. It reaches 60 frames, but does have the occasional moments of slowdown. This is usually in effect when more entities are being spawned, such as Cutenators, each with their own rainbow effect. Though this amplifies when gibs are being produced, lasers are being fired, etc. That pretty much covers the traditional portions of the game. We started off very strong, then got into the negatives. The game was in fact rushed according to an Artec Studios developer, who once stated that they were actually forced last minute to make minigame adaptations for the game by the publishers at Majesco. First in the line of minigames we have Cojones Golf and Country Golf. This minigame plays the same as the main game, although there is just one objective. You, as Raze, are put in a small field with a ball and a goal, among other obstacles. You can kick the ball, use your weapons against it, or roll into it to move it from one place to another. You get unlimited ammunition for the 4 available weapons, the Spiker, the Seeker, the Driller, and the Blaster. There are 36 holes to conquer, one of them being very phallic.
Straight as my well-weathered willy.
But honestly, it's a bit of a chore. The physics of the ball are very poor. You'll hit it one way and often it'll go somewhere completely different. That, and it tends to just bounce all over the place, making it very difficult to estimate your shots. It even bounces out of the hole quite frequently. You ever played golf where the ball could leap right out of the hole? Sure, this is a different spin on the formula, but thanks to the physics, it just barely works. The only real enjoyment I had here was hearing the Scottish impersonations from Sliv as he introduced the new holes. This is also the reason that ESRB rated the game with mature humor, because Sliv makes some seriously inappropriate remarks.
Do you mind what happened to William Wallace? Aye, they degnutted him, they cut his willy off, and that's what's going to happen to you!
The fun stops when you complete 18 holes though, as the second round has no dialogue present. Such a shame, because it was the only thing holding my attention in this minigame. Survival mode is about as advanced as any survival mode usually was at the time. You're put into a small arena with lots of replenishing ammunition, and of course, limitless hordes of enemies. The challenge goes wave by wave with no exception to enemy types. I've come across them all in this mode, except for maybe the single homing launcher critter. The only objective is to stay alive, so naturally you'll be endlessly slaughtering the oncoming threat until that objective is failed. To my knowledge, there's no way to win this mode, which makes it exclusive to high scores. There are just 3 maps, which is a bit of a letdown. The first map, Hard as a Rock, really isn't very good. It's a very claustrophobic map which is set in one of the darkest atmospheric environments in the game. The second map is decent. It has a large opening with a narrow pathway. There are also a few plants here that fling you to the other side of the map, making it not as overwhelming as it appears, since you can lead the horde one way, then near instantly fly off in the other direction. It isn't cheap, as regardless they will inevitably flank you at some point. Not a bad map. The third map, Bush Valley, is similar to the last, although this one is more condensed and takes place in a darker environment. The width is equal throughout the map, but this isn't a bad thing since you're given enough space to move around obstacles easily. It takes form in 2 respectively narrow trenches, putting a pretty unique spin on the survival formula. I'd say it formulates better than the other 2, though had it been a little brighter, it could have been great. As such, it comes off as decent. Silent but Deadly is a welcome minigame, giving you 6 unique maps in which to take out the Kewletts via stealth. It's a great place to check out some of the animations you might not have seen in the main game. They're set up for sneaking around and some of them are quite challenging, but always fair due to the radar on the bottom left of the screen. If you screw up, it was likely your own fault. My biggest complaint is the existence of only 6 maps. I would have taken out the golf minigame entirely for more of these stealth maps. After all, these look pretty easy to have made. There exists a bit of a secret map you can get by encountering a glitch on the last map. If you quickly press play next level when the map finishes, it'll take you to a massive overworld with a nearby finished level. The level doesn't seem to be entirely completable due to the Kewletts being stuck between some walls, but you can finish it by just walking over to the other side. If you explore the vast openness though, you'll eventually come across all the other maps in the stealth minigame, proving that it was just one big map loading all along rather than 6 small ones, or in this case 7. It's not really that important, but it's something I noticed nonetheless. Save the Schnow is a minigame where you save the Schnow. The game seems to not know how to spell this creature's name. Anyways, Raze is restricted to a small hill where he picks off the invasion one by one before they're able to reach the Schnow. The Schnow is unable to defend itself, so the task is entirely up to you. You've got an arsenal at your disposal though, with an available turret and rocket squibs around the environment, able to be shot for an explosive effect. I didn't notice the turret had a slowdown until playing this. Regardless, the speed at which this thing moves is really slow. I guess that's why in a dire situation you're able to disengage the turret and use your available squibs. You're unable to move out of this hill area, so unfortunately anything close range isn't an option. The Schnow has a lot of health, though it can reduce quickly in a stressful situation. You'll likely start off shooting the balloons the Special Ops Kewletts are deployed on, certainly putting the turret to good use. However, it quickly introduces a mix between foot soldiers and deployed soldiers. After each wave, you'll have a chance at replenishing some of the Schnow's health by shooting the bomber bears thrown in the distance. They're difficult to shoot at, but the reward is worth the task. This minigame might have an ending, but I'm unsure as I was never able to make it too far. The minigame has just one level included, which is a disappointment, but at least it's different enough from the others. In terms of execution, this feels like the most finished of the minigames. The minigames are a nice diversion from the other portions of the game and bring some replayability to Raze's Hell. Those looking for a bit more from the game probably won't be disappointed, although admittedly had there been extra time put into the development, these could have been a lot better. Ironically, my strongest complaint is the font choice here. I believe it's the default font called Calibri. This consists throughout the menus as well. I'm certainly confused by its use, especially when another font exists in the game, as seen in the floating numbers after executing an enemy in survival. Perhaps that font only consisted of numbers? Now for the last portion of the game, it's multiplayer. Raze's Hell offers the entire campaign in split screen with much greater frame lag. A player can drop into single player at any time, which is an absolute brilliant idea. There are no options directly related to split screen, so those who prefer vertical are out of luck. That wouldn't be me, so I'm not complaining, but it's something to consider. As touched on earlier, Raze can drop squibs for the other player in-game, which makes teamwork innovative and interesting, should it be utilized properly. There exist multiple textures of Raze within the game for multiplayer, so my question is why split screen enables a second identical Raze. Alternate textures can be loaded in online and System Link, but not here for some reason. Perhaps it duplicates the exact code of Raze, enabling it to be controlled by the second character. I suppose that would restrict the physical attributes of Raze, but still, that feels like another unfinished idea to me. While the campaign is available in full co-op, unfortunately all other multiplayer modes are restricted to online and System Link. I can understand the lag introduced by multiple players, especially since it increases significantly for split screen, but to limit even 2 players from playing this mode? Why? These modes are significantly less system intensive than the campaign. I'd even wager that 4-player split screen would work fine here, so with what purpose was this restricted? I even wonder this for the minigames, but maybe the high scores weren't optimized for a second player, though that couldn't have taken long to change. Since Xbox Live for original Xbox titles has been disabled, you'll only be able to play the multiplayer modes through System Link with 2 copies of the game. But hey, at least it's still possible. The online and System Link modes consist of Deathmatch, Team Deathmatch, Soccer, Capture the Flag, King of the Hill, and Team King of the Hill. The largest oddity here is the soccer game, which upon entering, doesn't shape up to be as odd as you'd probably expect. There are 6 maps to choose from, which have 2 goals and a ball. Both players will attempt whatever necessary to get the ball from the middle into the opposing goal. You can kill other players, pick up ammunition, and roll to victory. A deviation from your typical game of soccer, but a very similar beast indeed. Much as the multiplayer seems to have had a decent amount of work put into it, there isn't much to really talk about. That being said, I'm certainly not the person to go to when it comes to multiplayer, so perhaps you should consult someone else about that, if you ever happen to find a critic to comment on it. The most important thing for me to mention are the surprisingly advanced options, allowing you to really customize your attributes upon entering the game. This is pretty much exclusive to weaponry, but in that area, there's no absence. I should mention the alternate voice options, which are just awesome. Now, I don't have an Xbox microphone to take advantage of here, so I won't be able to demonstrate that to you. Multiplayer introduces 2 new weapons to your arsenal, being the Humiliator and Splatter. Splatter works identically to the Paintball Critters weapon in the single-player campaign, but the Humiliator is entirely unique, turning whoever you shoot at into a Kewlett. The Kewlett can't benefit from Squib-based weaponry like Raze can, so he's left to stumble around until either the effect meter wears off, or you're killed by an opposing player. The maps often have a turret available within them, though you can actually turn them off if you wish. That's honestly about all I can think of to say about the multiplayer. Again, I'm not really big on multiplayer games, but I have to admit I can see myself having a lot of fun with this one. Perhaps that's just because it's Raze as hell, but it does feel very chaotic, which is bound to bring some sort of fun at least. To finally conclude, Raze as Hell is an underappreciated work of art. The game is certainly a stress reliever of sorts, and could even be seen as the video game equivalent of a punching bag. Behind its concept, there's more to be discovered, like the intuitive storyline, good level design, and soundtrack. The game is loaded with content, multiplayer and all, to keep you busy for a good long while, and if you're like me, to occupy literal days to weeks of play with multiple playthroughs. It's not a short game either, taking around 10 hours to beat on first try. Some similar environments can feel like a rehash at times, but the design of these levels makes up for a unique approach each time, and more story backing to proceed into them with. The gameplay is fun and can be approached in a multitude of ways, such as gun blazing and even stealth. Each approach reaps different rewards and keeps the player coming back for its diverse integration of each level that passes. Raze as Hell packs a punch, a big bladed arm punch that'll certainly destroy your face when you realize the game launched at only $20. Nowadays it can be found between $15 at the cheap and $30 at the pricey range. I wholeheartedly believe the game is worth every penny, and I hope I've persuaded you into giving it a try. It's available from retail and is downloadable from the Xbox Live Marketplace on the Xbox 360's backwards compatibility for $9.99. It's my favorite video game of all time, and I would really enjoy if more people could share this appreciation with me. I would like to dedicate this video to Jimmy DeKewlett, who has helped keep the dream alive alongside me with our continuous efforts to keep the conversations going. Thanks for watching. Now go forth and raise a little hell.
Interesting. Was it? I thought so. I guess. Man, you're hard to please. Look, I have every right to be grumpy, okay? Because of the reduced candy rations? Everything! Reduced candy, long grueling labor, 7 days a week, monster attacks even though there's a truce?
Sliv isn't a great king, is he?
He's terrible! But keep your voice down. Don't want to wind up sent in for re-education.
I'm just so sick of it all. The lockdown, the police, the stupid wall extension.
Shh! You're gonna get us in trouble!
Maybe I want to get us in trouble. Maybe I'm tired of trying to make Cutopia great again.
Oh, shut up! Shut up! No candy and re-education. Just a lot of shock therapy and other stuff I can't quite remember.
You've been in too many times, starting to get fried. Sliv really is a terrible king.
Oh, well. At least there are people out there who still care about us.
Yeah, thanks for caring, friends.
That's a nice note to end on.
Wait. Are we thanking the community of Kewlett-killing bastards who played this game?
Ooh, good point. Yeah, screw you guys.
Yeah, get lost, jerks.